everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I'm here with Dave, Julie, Jen, and Ed. And we are here today to read a short story. It's a memoir, and it's called The Constancy of Entropy. And as a summary, it says, this is my story about discovering I have ADD and learning to cope with it. So Julie is going to read for us today.
Just because something bears the aspect of the inevitable, one should not, therefore, go along willingly with it. Philip K. Dick. We just don't understand why she's struggling so much in the class. To that, my chemistry teacher replies, struggling implies effort, and she hasn't put in any. I feel myself tense up defensively. I already know what comes next. Annoyance, anger, guilt, frustration, all the emotions on point, like clockwork, and then the tears. You can't seriously be crying again. I quickly cover my face, but I can still feel the reactions of those around me. My teacher rolls his eyes, my guidance counselor tenses up with concern, and my parents sigh with frustration. This was one of the many parent-teacher meetings I had my junior year of high school. Some involved the principal, my academic advisor, my counselor, sometimes even 2 or 3 of my teachers. It was mid-November, and I'd already had 2 of these meetings. I cried at both. Hence the eye roll. This was the 3rd. I was the only kid in my chemistry class who'd managed to fail every single test in the marking period. I was infamous. My chemistry teacher was also a big fan of peer grading, which meant I had a stack of graded tests with comments on them like, bravo, and you're the real MVP, next to scores like 40 and 15. Sometimes they even sank into the single digits, bravo indeed. I was the girl who made everyone else feel better about failing. If someone didn't study or do their homework, they could just tell themselves, hey, at least you know Brief definitely didn't. And with that thought, they could go on with their day feeling a little less guilty. Glad I could help. I embraced this persona my peers had given me. I embraced it because it gave me some semblance of pride. This self-deprecation is what the school psychologist would later refer to as my go-to coping mechanism. After finally catching my breath, my guidance counselor suggested I talk to the school psychologist, and with that, the meeting was over. I went back to class and relayed what had happened in the meeting to my friends. They were concerned when they saw my puffy red eyes, but I assured them that I was fine. I cried because I just didn't feel like dealing with another lecture from my parents and how they didn't like confrontation, so tears would help. And I laughed it off as just another one of my antics, and to that I got a sarcastic slow clap and a few chuckles. I hadn't intended on actually seeing the school psychologist until I got called to her office during one of my few periods a few days later. I'd seen enough movies to know how it would go. She'd ask me to sit and then ask about my day, and I'd entertain her mundane questions until I'd finally just tell her to cut the crap and convince her I was fine, and I was just having trouble balancing my school and my social life, and that would be that. But when I got to her office, she asked me to sit, asked me about my day, and then asked me what I planned to do with my life. The suddenness of the question caught me off guard, so I just shrugged and said I didn't know. She asked me if I planned on going to college. I shrugged again. Of course. She replied, do you know you'll get into college with the grades you've been getting? Do you think you'll, oh my goodness. And with that, I felt the defensiveness building up again. I thought you were supposed to help me, not lecture me, but I said nothing. And then, as if she could read my mind, I'm not trying to lecture you. I just want you to know, because not many students understand this, that there are other options. School just isn't for everyone. You could take online classes or go to a trade school, and again, like clockwork, the tears came. But this time they weren't met with an eye roll. Knowing that in a world where education is the only way to succeed, someone acknowledging the fact that I can't be traditionally educated and may never fit into the regimented system of learning made me feel that no one may ever recognize how fully capable I am of forming great ideas, which was soul-crushing. She asked me why I was upset, and I told her that I wanted to go to college. So then why don't your grades reflect that? I had no answer for her. She gave me a book she thought I'd like, and then I left. The book was called Driven to Distraction, Recognizing and Coping with Attention Deficit Disorder. I wasn't surprised. I mean, I'd thought about it before, and I'd done enough Google searches to know what it was and the similarities there were between its symptoms and some of my habits. I went home, put my homework aside, per usual, and sat down thinking I'd skim a few pages. I read the whole book in one night. I couldn't sleep that night. knowing now there were other people out there like the author, Edward M. Hallowell, who went through the exact same things as me. It was like he'd literally written a book about my life. It was in the first few lines of the book that I knew I wasn't alone. He talks about the skeptics of ADD, with one particular quote that struck me. For some people, this was, and still is, heresy. The old moral model dies hard. It still lives on in the minds of certain groups and individuals. At the heart of the moral model beats the conviction that willpower controls all human emotion, learning, and behavior. Under this model, the cure for depression is to cheer up. The cure for anxiety is to suck it up. Now the cure for ADD is to try harder. While trying harder helps just about everything, telling someone with ADD to try harder is no more helpful than telling someone who's nearsighted to squint harder. It missed the biological point. He had put into words what I could never explain to people like my parents and teachers without sounding like I was making excuses. Suddenly there was justification for everything I'd done or hadn't done when it came to my schoolwork and social life. His words had brought me back to middle school when schoolwork had suddenly become somewhat difficult and there were no more easy A's. School had been a deflating rather than a rewarding environment to me. Keep those faces in mind, the little girls and boys in the early grades, all trusting the adults to show them the way, all eager and excited about life and what will come next, and then just follow those faces over time. Follow the face of a little girl who doesn't read very well and is told to try harder, who tends to daydream and is told she'd better pay attention, who talks out in class when she sees something fascinating like a butterfly on the window pane and is told to leave the class and report to the principal, who forgets her homework and is told she will just never learn, will she, who writes a story rich in imagination and insight and is told her handwriting and spelling are atrocious, who asks for help and is told she should try harder herself before getting others to do her work for her, who begins to feel unhappy in school and is told that big girls try harder. This is the brutal process of the breaking of the spirit of a child. I can think of no more precious resource than the spirits of our children. Life necessarily breaks us all down somewhat, but to do it unnecessarily to our children in the name of educating them, this is a tragedy. To take the joy of learning, which one can see in any child experimenting with something new, to take that joy and turn it into fear, that is something we should never do. I realized there were so many things about myself that were bringing me down, and there were so many others out there that were the same way. I finally understood why I could read a whole 300-page book in one night but never finish a chapter in a textbook. Why I couldn't remember certain things, no matter how hard I tried to commit them to memory, because short-term memory loss is another common symptom of ADD. Why I could feel so incredibly pathetic and useless when I couldn't remember something I learned in class an hour ago, or a person's name who I met several times, or how to multiply, or write on my notes in one notebook rather than scraps of paper that would end up in the trash, or how I could forget what I was trying to say to someone in the middle of a sentence, or how one little accomplishment made me feel so good that I couldn't even remember what it felt like to be a failure, or understand how I could be so lazy to the point where I'm right back at not having done a single thing, and sink lower and lower, because with every unfinished task, you feel another one coming. Time ceases to exist because you feel like nothing's getting done now, and you convince yourself nothing will get done later either. The entropy of the universe takes its ultimate toll. And the worst part is, everyone else has somehow always got their stuff together. You're all climbing this mountain, but for some reason, you have to keep stopping or you'll fall off. But you're still watching everyone go completely unhindered until you suddenly realize you've been carrying a backpack full of rocks and their backpack's all empty. They don't see all that's holding you back, so they don't understand. Finally knowing the problem was liberating. Reading this book had validated everything in myself that I had scoffed at, but this is where it gets tricky. You know you've got this problem, but now you must come to terms with the fact that there's no cure, only treatment. The first thing anyone might suggest is medication, which I suggested to my parents. They, however, refused. I can't say I was all for taking those brain morphine meds either. But I was at a point where I saw no other way to fix myself. Eventually, I'd come to terms with the fact that if I wanted to change, I had to do it on my own. One thing I've read that is common in people with ADD is our survival instinct. When we see that something isn't working, whether it's of our own accord or not, we can only focus from that point on another course of action that may work better. With another string of Google searches, I taught myself different strategies to motivate myself, stay focused, and stay positive. I conceded that the only way to get my grades up was to swallow my pride and ask my teachers and friends for help. I ended the year with a C in chemistry and a few B's and C's in my other classes. I passed, and that was good enough, for everyone else at least. I spent the summer wallowing in the fact that I'd screwed up the most important year of high school and that I'd never get into a decent college. But being a survivalist, no matter what the situation, I found other ways to prove myself to schools I'd never have a chance of getting into with a 2.4 GPA. I put my GPA and my senior year's schoolwork aside and put everything I had in me into studying for the SAT, writing my college essays, and going to interviews. I refrained from telling some of my classmates what schools I was applying to. I knew exactly what kind of reactions I would get if they knew I had hopes of getting into some fairly selective colleges. In retrospect, it probably was naive of me to believe I could do it, but I did. When spring came, I'd gotten acceptances from all of my top choice schools. I spent the rest of the year being bombarded by questions like, how'd you do it? I brushed them off by saying I had a decent SAT score, a Princeton Review's college essays that make a difference worth essay, and played the Hispanic card. It's always been a habit of mine to undermine myself to others. But this time, invalidating myself didn't feel so bad because I knew exactly what I was dealing with in my own head, and I knew I was capable. This aversion to reveling in these rare opportunities to brag comes from opposition to competition between myself and my peers, and the insecurity it brings that seems to burrow itself deeper the harder I try to wrench it out. That's another thing I have to work on. But I guess there's always another thing. Ernest Hemingway once said, "There's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self." So I'll work on myself for now. My life had been one long inner dialogue interrupted by the disappointment of those around me when I couldn't succeed, and the constant reminders to my teachers and parents when I actually accomplished something. Don't get too excited. I'm probably going to screw up the next five things I do. I no longer feel the need to do that, but sometimes it's instinctive. Over the past 2 years, I've developed the rarest combination of confidence and humility to seek help when I need it, and to understand that it really isn't my fault. ADD has been regarded as one of the most detrimental disorders a person could have, but once diagnosed, there's much beauty in it. I see it in myself. All the positive attributes that come with having ADD, like resilience, creativity, bravery. I had let myself drown for so long because I felt like I couldn't cope. The problem was I had no idea what I was trying to cope with. Diagnosis is the most important step when it comes to ADD because sometimes it's all a person needs. I can't say that I've completely reinvented myself. I'm in college now, and it's only gotten more difficult. But I find comfort in knowing that these failures and triumphs will ultimately balance each other out. Everything in life comes together to fall apart. That's the entropy of the universe. It is in a constant state of random disorder that can only be controlled by our actions. The one constant in my life will always be the lack of constants. And I'm okay with that.
Okay. I don't know who wants to start. I guess I'll start with one thing. I think the subject is very interesting, and I liked hearing about how you learned more about yourself and how you overcame it. And I think for me, I'd be interested in seeing some more scenes that show me even more about what you're going through. So even though I really enjoyed reading about what happened, I'd also, let's say as an example, the session with the psychologist. I felt like I wanted to be there for that whole scene. So not only would I hear what you're saying and that what I think it's a she was saying,
yes.
But I also, then I'd want to hear what you're thinking too, but step by step, what's happening, because I think this is really interesting. I didn't know that people with ADD had short-term memory. Did everyone else know that? That was interesting.
I probably knew it but forgot it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the most interesting and compelling parts of this are the parts that are about her, not about like the theory of ADD.
Yes.
And I think including the big long quotes from the other books really bogs it down, really slows it down. I would say either remove them or really, short.
Streamline.
Yeah, streamline. Very good. Because the parts about her, and we really get to see, I think, the progression of the person. Where she's starting from, kind of the realization and what she does as a result. and what the consequences of that are, which, you know, that's a terrific arc.
Once again, I'll completely disagree with you.
Okay.
What a surprise!
The beauty of this is it's a memoir, it's not fiction. So I don't think we're supposed to be involved in her life, history, or story. It's about discovery. What she does is it starts out slowly, frankly. I didn't like the stuff at the beginning where everybody else did. I liked it once the discovery of the problem came. The writing just picked right up for me. It became crystal clear. She made a point and proved it with the quotes from the text that she was reading. I thought it was a terrific essay. I wouldn't add or detract anything from it. There were some technical things, grammar. There's a lot of grammar that really needs to be fixed. I'm going to put Ed on that because he's better at it than I am.
Lots of comments.
Okay, good. No, I thought it, and it's funny how the essay itself paralleled her life in general.
Yes.
Started out muddled and confused and walking around, and then she found God in the textbook, and then her life focused and solidified and became very, very clear.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she was intending to do that, but it came through loud and clear. She was confused at first, found the answer, and this is the way I'm thinking now.
Yeah.
Focused, clear, accurate, very well done. I thought it was a great essay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really like the way that, like you said, it was, kind of muddled and confused at the beginning, and then becomes more clear as it goes through.
Tightened right up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess if it were an essay, I would agree with you, but that's not what it is. It's a memoir.
Right.
It's not an essay. So for me, I felt like the focus was on the results and the destination as opposed to the journey. And and I can be sympathetic, with someone who has a learning disability, or I don't know what the right word is. Learning differently, or whatever the right term is, but I can't sympathize if the only thing that I saw was this one scene in the very beginning where the teachers and the parents were being completely horrible, and that made me, I'm like, all right, I'm going to care about this girl because she's really got no one working in her corner. But then it was just telling, and just more telling, and then big quotes, which I felt like stopped the narrative. What I would suggest is that, if it's a memoir and not an essay, then I would suggest reading a couple of books about kids who are dealing with disabilities. And the example I would give is called Fish in a Tree by Linda Mullally Hunt, about a little girl who is dealing with dyslexia. And it shows her in the beginning struggling, the teachers don't get it, the parents don't get it, she thinks she's stupid, and then she meets this teacher. And in your story, you meet the psychologist who diagnoses you, and the whole world changes. And that book, you go along with the child and you experience the journey and the emotion, and you're happy when she finally things start clicking. And I think if this is a memoir, you need to do more of that.
Can we just change it to essay?
Yeah, if it's an essay, then it's...
I know, because that depends on what she wants to do.
Right.
This is the entirety of it. So a memoir is a much longer story.
Right.
It's like a couple of pages.
Yeah.
This truly is an essay.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay.
Because I read it more as an essay, and as an essay I really enjoyed it. I did. If I were to read it as a short story, then I would want...
That's a good point.
And it really is, because if I were to see it as a short story, I'd want to see a lot more. And as an essay, I was totally fine with
If
it.
it were memoir, it would be, these things would actually be scenes.
Yes.
Right? It wouldn't be her telling, I studied for the SATs. It would be a scene. I have 10 books in front of me, I'm doing this.
But there were
be scenes.
a couple of things I think she glazed over, though, that I would have liked to have known more about, like on page 3, where she says, it may never fit into the regimented system of learning, made me feel that no one may ever recognize how fully capable I am of forming great ideas. And like, what? Tell me, what are they?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like tell me. It just kind of stopped there, and if
That was
you,
also a complicated sentence.
oh, I
that
thought
was
it was
a-
too long,
yeah.
pause
By the
for
time I get
breath,
to the
that's
end of it, it's
very.
like-
There were some very long
Very
sentences in here.
In paragraphs, one suggestion I would
Yeah, the
make
paragraph,
is to examine paragraphs and look at places where you can break them up
Naturally
for effect. Like sometimes you can break out one phrase and that becomes a paragraph in itself. But that's like a pivotal kind of thing. It's like,
Yes.
but I couldn't. That's
Right.
that's,
Yeah,
a-
I
that's an
remember
interesting
saying that.
phrase, something like that. And that keeps readers coming along. When readers see like these huge paragraphs, it's like, uh-oh.
They're
Okay.
overwhelming.
It's a Russian novel.
Yeah,
I
right.
wrote notes about paragraph breaks too, I saw some very long paragraphs. If I may speak grammatically, on page 2, it's one of my pet peeves, just a little writer's infusion lesson to you all. There's a misplaced modifier at the start of the second paragraph. After finally catching my breath, comma, my guidance counselor.
Right.
So if that is an introductory clause, it would have to modify guidance counselor, and it doesn't. So it can be changed to after I finally caught my breath, or my guidance counselor suggested thus and such, and put the phrase after finally somewhere later. In the next sentence, it says, I went back to class and relayed, and that's misspelled, but I corrected it for you, what had happened to the meeting to my friends. It seems as if it's the meeting to my friends. And so you want to say, relayed to my friends, what happened to the meeting. So a couple of twists like that. But more importantly, you have some great ideas here. Do break them up so they're noticeable instead of buried in a large paragraph. And I think that people with ADD could certainly relate to this, and those who don't have it might get it better by your having explained it in that. That's a wonderful thing. So bravo.
And something else I'd want to see too is near the end when you talk about possibly taking drugs as being a solution and your parents didn't want you to do it. I don't know if you really went into, you said you didn't really believe in it either, but that could be something to talk about a little bit too, and it could be, if that was a conflict with you and your parents and they didn't and you did or didn't, I don't know, just something I'd want to know a little bit more about, because, I don't know how many people take drugs. So I guess I'd want to know more about if you considered taking drugs or you didn't need them, and what did you think about that? Why did you come to that
the pros and the
conclusion?
cons of
Right.
doing that.
I want to know.
Yeah, but I feel like that's that's an example of her leaving out the good stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
there's glazing over, and I have a lot in my comments like, why? Tell me, like what?
Yes.
Like there was a lot of that. Like I want to know more because I think it's a fascinating and emotional topic.
Maybe you could have an essay version and then your short story
Yeah.
version.
The other thing I would say is that for some reason on page 5 you switched to second person midway through.
Oh,
I don't know why you did that, but I marked that too.
Now, as a physicist, the title is The Constancy of Entropy.
Yeah.
And I think you really need to define entropy for people when you first mention it.
Does that mean just a slowing down of?
Now, entropy means disorder.
Right.
Oh,
It's a measure of.
In the last paragraph, it's defined. It should be defined earlier on.
Right. And so, if you're going to use that as the title, and you use it once in the middle of the piece, and then once at the end. I think you really need to give the reader either a definition or an example of what this is, because I think most people don't know what it is.
I knew.
Good point.
Good.
You get a vocabulary checklist.
Yeah. Bonus points for Sue.
Yeah.
I like the Ernest Hemingway quote. There's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man, excuse me. True nobility is being superior to your former self. So be a better you. I think that's wonderful and incentive for anyone.
Yeah,
It's
for
great.
everybody.
It's just great that you've done all this. It's really impressive. Does anyone have anything else to add?
No, just a great, I thought it was terrific. I read it about a month ago, and it was good. And I read it this morning, and it was even better. Honestly, very good. It's
Very
terrific
good.
stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for submitting. We really enjoyed
Yes.
reading. You did a really good job. And do consider, if you wanted to take this more into a memoir, short story, delving into some areas so that we can learn even more about what you went through. Because we've all enjoyed hearing about that. So thank you for submitting, and thank you everyone else for joining us for this episode of Writers Infusion. We will see you next time, and keep writing.
And it was called the entropy of the universe, the randomness of things, because we think there's order out there, Mr. Physicist.
It's like my cell.
What's that?
Like yourself.
It's like my cell.
Like the whole house. Let's talk about
My
the
I
whole
know, I
house.
put it,
You're right.
Yes. You put
Just
yourself in there.
floating around.
yeah.
Fingers floating
Right.
around.
No,
I like
my
your
house is
last
like
line.
that.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have this thing tonight, and I just had to take
Beautiful.
everything in the
See,
kitchen and shove it in the
I have a
bedroom.
theory about
It's a
that.
big
I do that too.
pile.
Yes.
Organized houses are for the
People with no
idiots,
kids.
idiots.
Yeah, for idiots.
Because
Good.
they need to know where they put it.
Oh.
People with a brain remember
Yes,
where they put it.
organized chaos. Stephen, do you hear
I
that?
can
Dave, you're a
read,
genius.
I can reach it. Where'd you put it? It's 4 inches down
Yes.
on a pile of crap next
Yes.
to my bed.
Yes.
I know exactly
It's
where
under
it
the
is.
coffee table.
Well, my mom says
Yes.
that if you have a messy house, it's a sign of a creative person.
Absolutely, I believe
See,
it.
and I say the opposite.
No.
It's actually the same, actually, but I
Yes.
say, when people say my house is messy, I'm like, hey, a clean house is a sign of a wasted life.
Absolutely.
Yay!
Get a life.
Yes.
Get a life.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, Mom. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.